if anyone has a problem in joining. So I think we have everyone here. So I'd like to start by introducing our project, the Project Amara. So this is a project where we talk about sustainable menstruation. We hold awareness circles and we try to talk about the various period products available. And we start from the most widely available period products like sanitary napkins and tampons and how they affect our body, the environment, you know, every stakeholder, the person who makes it, and the sanitation workers who have to pick it up in the end. So that's the work we do. We talk to people from everywhere, from cities, corporates, from villages, literally all across. We talk to people who go through the process of menstruation, and we also talk to people who are non-menstruators, and that's mostly men. And we've been doing this work since 2016. It initially started as a school project in DLRCR school, and now we've grown to an NGO and we work much more widely. So that's a little bit of our introduction. In the past 2 years, we've worked with more than 10,000 people, menstruators and non-menstruators. And in COVID itself, during the pandemic, we have raised over 1.5 lakhs. And all of this has gone towards distribution of menstrual products, which are sustainable and last menstruators for a long period of time. So that's what we do. We want to create a place where menstrual products are accessible to everyone, where periods are safe. And that's what we've been trying to do in every way possible, basically. Yeah.
Thanks, Sahana.
So I think, yeah. Yeah, Anjali will tell us more about this festival, and yeah, you
Yes.
can take it from here, Anjali.
Thanks so much, Ahana. I will also give you a little bit of context on this particular. So, we're organizing this as part of Maasika Mahotsav, which translates to Period Festival. And it's a beautiful initiative that was started by Muse Foundation and a period of sharing. It's celebrated across Asia and Africa. And this year, despite the pandemic, it's really amazing to see the amount of participation that has come up. We'll put the social media links for Maasika Mahotsav in the chat. There's some amazing things that so there is a series of conversations about the importance of talking about menstruation in the pandemic, period taboos that still exist, cross conversations between people from different as backgrounds, different locations, and of course, a lot of celebration as well. To throw light on, especially even during the pandemic, just there are a lot of issues, especially in India, regarding health, regarding infrastructure, regarding access to basic necessities and facilities. But we can't forget menstruation, because those who are menstruating are still going through menstruation, and many of them are having it even worse off now, either because they've lost their livelihoods and can't afford period products. Many don't have access to clean and safe and hygienic infrastructures, toilets. Many don't have access to underwear, so they can't wear their period products even if they have period products. In quarantine centers and those who are on the front line, so people who are working as nurses and doctors and police, people who manning the lockdowns as police officers, they don't have time, they don't have the resources to manage their menstruation in a dignified way. So we still need, and of course the whole aspect of not having access to proper food, not having access to nutritious food, and how that is impacting menstruators' bodies, especially in this lockdown and in this pandemic. So we absolutely have to talk about periods even during this pandemic, during this difficult time. And that is what this festival aims to do, along with celebrating it and breaking taboos and stigmas that are associated with it. So as part of this festival, we're very happy to be sharing this space with Varsha and her amazing film today. And Surabhi is going to introduce Varsha.
Thank you, Anjali. Varsha is a dear friend of mine. We met in university, and I got to know her while she was making the film, and it was amazing. Varsha Gill is a feminist filmmaker, social change oriented film educator, and textile artist based out of Vancouver, Canada, which is the unceded territory of the Musqueam peoples, the Squamish peoples, and the Tsleil-Waututh peoples. She is a third generation Indo Canadian, born and raised in the unceded Coast Salish territories with family roots in northwestern India. Varsha is deeply passionate about community building, exploring her local mountains, and challenging social stigma through art. I will let Anjali and Ahana now introduce the film in a bit.
Okay, great. Ahana, would you like to take this or shall I go ahead?
You can go ahead.
Okay, sure. So I'm going to mainly let Varsha introduce. I think she also has some things to say, but just before that, this film, essentially we will be looking at how menstruation is a subjective experience and how it is also, it's experienced across by everyone. So this is something that's really important, and we need to understand that menstruation is experienced differently by different people. And that is something that we will be looking at through this film. We'll also be looking at the stigmas that are associated with it and how we can challenge those, and how we need to make our conversations about menstruation also more inclusive. So I'll hand it over to Varsha to describe this further, and then we can go ahead with the screening.
Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you to all of you who are here watching. It is so heartwarming to me that people are engaging with this topic and interested in having this conversation. A little bit about the film. I'll give you some background without over-explaining it, and then we'll go and watch it. Actually, my inspiration for the film took place while I was in India. I was at a conference in a very, very rural part of India, and I was in a room with a bunch of people of different genders, and we were having a session about menstruation. And I realized I was, I think, 20 years old, 19 or 20, that it was the first time that I had ever had that conversation in my life with people of different genders, kind of curious and engaging with the topic without fear and stigma. And it just occurred to me that this is crazy. This is something that I probably should have talked about a lot longer ago. And so I got interested in the topic. I had different friends throughout my travels that I talked about their different experiences of menstruation. I had one friend that would wear a moon bracelet every single time they were bleeding. And then other friends that just didn't want to do anything about menstruation, didn't like it at all. And so I decided, I grew up in this part of Canada that is supposed to be all liberal and progressive and all of these buzzwords. And yet I've never had this conversation at my liberal arts university. Me and my girlfriends, we would talk about it, but it would mostly be about kind of disliking the experience. Not to say you have to love it, but it just didn't feel like the whole conversation was opened up. So what I did was created a bunch of questions that I wanted to ask people, and then just asked people in my university community if they would come talk to me about it, and consented to having their interview be recorded. And so I talked to 16 people in my community, trying to get, both non-menstruators and menstruators, people of different ages, different ethnicities, whatnot, and had many conversations, very deep and meaningful conversations that really highlighted a few things that Anjali was saying. Menstruation is experienced very subjectively. We all have a different experience of it or perception of it, even if we don't menstruate. However, menstruation is a very deep experience. For me, it's in my body. If it's not in your body, it's felt very deeply by somebody around you that you probably love or very close to. And it's physiological and it's human. So to pretend like it doesn't happen, or to just see it in a very narrow light, doesn't really fly for us, because, well, it happens. And so what I did was I took all of these audio interviews, very like hundreds of hours, and wanted to condense it into something that would be a lot more digestible and really highlighted that, the diversity of experiences. And so I created an audio collage, pulling in, little parts of each person's stories. There's so much depth, and unfortunately I had to cut it out. And I wish to make more films with that depth of experience in the future, but for the sake of this one, I wanted to show so many things. And then I took it to a studio that was kind of like designed in my basement. I used sari fabric on top of a yoga mat. I was all like just trying to make it work. And then I filmed visuals to evoke some of the meaning of the words. And my goal here is not to sanitize menstruation, but also to understand that it's something that not a lot of people are going to be comfortable looking at, especially maybe with younger audiences. And so I'm trying to create, analogies, are evocative images that convey the depth, the meaning, without showing a bleeding vagina, because that won't necessarily be accessible to people of all ages. So yeah, without giving you too much now, I would love to play the film for you, and then we can continue the conversation afterwards. And how, basically, like, these are ways that we sometimes as women pass along stigma to one another, and culturally, societally. And so that I was particularly interested in the Indian context because that's also where my background is from. But that's kind of, to answer your question, I would say the differences between Indians here, there is just as subjective as menstruation itself, because everyone has such different feelings and perceptions of it.
Yeah. And when it comes to the religious viewpoint, did you find any stories, anything where women or people, any reasons why, not go to the temple, or any reasoning behind all of this religious stigma or practices?
Yeah, it's such a wealth of like experience and literature out there, and I just took one specific dive into it. I did a case study of the I don't want to butcher the name, Sabarimala temple in South India. Yeah. And the extreme responses to it. And so both the fact that women, which saying only women are not allowed in the temple excludes people of different genders who menstruate below the ages of 50. Well, not everyone menstruates until 50. Were not allowed into the temple. And then suddenly they were allowed into the temple. And how for months women didn't enter the temple because they were scared. And then it had to be cleansed afterwards. And how part of the protests and the backlash to it was actually women themselves on the front line saying women shouldn't enter the temple. So I think in some ways that's ingrained stigma. So, I'm happy to pass along the paper if anyone is interested, but I guess it felt to me like I couldn't really answer the question so much as like, this is so deeply part of the cultural practices and the ways of being and knowing that to untangle menstrual stigma also requires looking at every facet of life, including religion and how we've come to be in our religion and world. So
absolutely.
Sorry for the abstract answer.
No, that's okay. Thank you, and looking forward to more work from you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sақshi, for your questions. We have a few moderated discussion questions that we've planned. And then again, we're going to open the floor up. We're definitely going to go a little bit over time. Sorry, everyone. But we hope that you're also having an interesting, you're learning a lot, and this is interesting for you as well. So Ahana, do you want to go ahead with the first question?
Yeah. So we have a few questions for Varsha. So I guess they cover like a broad area of topics. So we'll just get into that. So Varsha, what is your experience of menstruation?
Yeah, I love this question so much because it feels like I go around asking everyone about menstruation. It's only fair if people ask me the question back. So I would say, like, as I kind of was speaking about before, I was very intrigued in the idea that like maybe I would want to wear a moon bracelet when I menstruated. Essentially, I grew up, really wanting my period when I was young because it maybe felt like I would be a bit older and more of a woman, and then getting it and feeling so deeply ashamed. Didn't want my mom to know, didn't want anyone to know, and being taught little things like to flush the toilet when I opened the pad wrapper in the bathroom because nobody should know about this. And so I kind of just went on with life, sort of either disliking it or feeling relatively neutral towards it. It's just like it happens, but I don't really like it. And so it was just so interesting to me that some people had sacred rituals around it. I had one friend that would pour their menstrual blood into the forest when they were bleeding. And so when I went into my research, I asked questions like, do you have any menstrual rituals that you practice? Or how do you feel about your menstrual blood or your uterus or something like that? And essentially, like, I heard all these answers and then just wanted to try them. It's like, okay, like this wasn't in my nature necessarily, but I would love to know what it would feel like. So I, talked to people about painting with your menstrual blood. I had one friend that made a self-portrait, a portrait of themselves with their menstrual blood. Another friend that talked about bathing in their menstrual blood or rubbing it all over their body in the shower. Lots of people that would like offer it to the earth and whatever. And, it was basically just exploratory. It was like I was opening myself to these things that weren't necessarily immediately comfortable to me. And it was cool. And I would say that it was not exactly me and things that I wouldn't necessarily never do again. But I would say that I think it's kind of funny because I've spent a lot of my time, life, energy thinking about menstruation, and that truly I just kind of have a neutral perspective on it. I don't feel like it's like so special to me when I start to bleed. Like it hurts, it's kind of uncomfortable. I feel fine about it. Like I don't feel embarrassed, but it is not always like, yeah, it's not something I necessarily have this beautiful perspective of. And what that has helped me see is that is the perspective that I want to have towards menstrual activism. That like in advocating for destigmatizing menstruation, I want to not say to people, you have to love menstruation, you have to see it as this sacred ritual, but instead just say, you're going to have whatever perspective you want, but the baseline should be normal. And then you can go ahead and add any other meaning you see fit. So this is a normal physiological process. And if it's like a very connected time to your body, then that's so beautiful. Or if you kind of want to just not think about it, or if you take birth control so you don't have a period, that's also very valid. So again, sorry for the long answer, but that is my feelings around it. Are it's just neutral, but it should be normal.
Yeah, that's great. And what you said right in the beginning, I think that's something that a lot of young girls would resonate with. Like before you get your period, maybe when your friends have your periods, it's kind of this thing that, okay, you're going to become a woman, you're growing up, and there's this buzz around it in a lot of cultures also, and just in general also. And when you actually go through the process, you realize it's not so flowery and you realize the stigmas around it. So I think that's something really relatable. And what you spoke about trying out different things, I think it really helps you step into other people's shoes and see things from their perspective. So I really commend that. And that's just amazing, like that you're able to do that. And it's also, I think, being able to validate each kind of existence, like you mentioned, like all of them are equally valid. So that's super, yeah, that's great. So our next question for you is, yeah. So like when I saw the film, like my response was that it's so beautiful and intricate, and even our feelings for menstruation, they're usually big feelings. There's good parts and not so good parts, but those metaphors and those symbols really captured that. So what was your vision for the film, and how did you actualize it, and how did you know which stories you want to tell? It's
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. Well, I think, to be honest, like my vision for the film was that I wanted it to be something that was accessible to all audiences, which I think is essentially an impossible task in any work. You're never going to fully represent and include everyone, or there's always going to be people that don't necessarily feel comfortable engaging with your work. And so while I knew that that was relatively impossible, I wanted to strive for that. And so um, yeah, I basically wanted to make it beautiful, to invite people into the conversation about menstruation, to make it, you know, captivating. It's like, what is this bleeding strawberry or something? Like, it's seems like it's maybe like we shouldn't talk about this, but then also it's fine because it's just fake blood on a strawberry, so it's not bad to look at. And then yeah, you know, trying to have just so many perspectives juxtaposed. Like I had my friend saying like it's such a relief to have their period because it means they're not pregnant, and my mom saying like when she got her period, when she was trying to get pregnant, it was so devastating. And so trying to hold just all of those perspectives in one, essentially that was my goal, was to just have so many like both contradictory and overlapping perspectives next to each other really quickly. It kind of like hits you really fast and it just makes you think. And I really wanted to evoke both emotion in people, that like this is something that affects people deeply, and critical thinking. Like, why don't we look at all these other range of perspectives to think about how else we might be able to view this thing. And how did I actualize it? Tons of feedback, like really trying to engage people in the process. And you know, my academic mentor telling me like maybe you should include this line about how it would be sad for somebody trying to get pregnant, because I couldn't really view that from where I'm at in life. And my goal, as you hear in the end of the film, is to get people to join the conversation. That was another part of the project, was through both medium, which is me having conversations with other people, and message, asking people to join the conversation. I essentially wanted to proliferate a more normalized conversation about menstruation. And so to actualize it is doing exactly this, continuing this conversation right now. And yeah, not letting it just sit in a film, but saying like, okay, this is a tool now to talk to other people. So
I think the thing about what you said, using it as a tool, that's so powerful. And it's such a beautiful way to welcome people into this topic. And I really love how, you know, each scene and each opinion is shown in this really stark way, but so is the next. They're all shown in that equal way. There's no foreground, like there's no main character, or so that's something that I really loved about it. And even the colorful colors, the pop, and the natural elements, they make it all feel so normal, like everyday life and just natural. So that was like, I could really hear that when you were talking, and I could see it in the film.
thank you, Ahana.
Anjali, would you like to take the next few questions?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I think the next question is very, very pertinent to definitely in India, and even with the whole Maasika Mahotsav and the whole purpose of it, which is how do you think we should go about destigmatizing menstruation, and what is your approach to menstrual activism? That's a big question. We'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Okay, yeah. Well, I have sort of talked about this a little bit already. And I think, to me, like, so there's so many ways. Like I was doing a screening last week with an organization that's trying to get period products out to people that don't have access. And so their perspective is that if we want to destigmatize menstruation, well, we have to give everyone equal access, because if some people are not able to have, you know, a sanitary and comfortable way of going about their period, then they're going to probably feel more feelings about it. And so for me, it's just the simplest, most preliminary thing is just having conversations. I feel like the more that we keep this hush hush and we don't talk about this, the more we can either let negative social stigma take over the narrative, or that we kind of live in fear and uncertainty of it. And so my approach with the film is just to have open, honest, direct, inclusive conversations about menstruation, trying to practice listening, not trying to tell people how to feel and what this is without letting their perspectives shine through and come forward. And not saying like we have to see this as in one particular light, that we have to love menstruation, that the antithesis to negative menstrual stigma is to see it as a spiritual experience at the center of humanity. Because for some people that will resonate, and other people that will be very ostracizing and isolating. So simply put, I think just open conversations, allowing people to have their own truth, their own experiences, not telling them how to feel, and the rest can follow, having more access to products, things like that, feeling more open to talking about it with people of different backgrounds, that will come later.
Yeah, that's really important what you said about starting with conversations, and today's space also acts as a conversation, and then everyone here takes it forward as a conversation as well. But definitely conversations are so important. My other question is, how do you think intersectionality plays into experiences of menstruation? So do you think you mentioned this already briefly, but how do you think race, gender, caste, class, geographical locations, all of these different experiences and backgrounds influence how menstruation is perceived and experienced?
Wow, that's an amazing question too. Yeah, I think just like anything else, we recognize that intersectionality will complicate things, that people don't just experience sometimes one marginalization, one type of social oppression, but many, and then that expands the ways that you're not able to be yourself in society. And so, I think the answer to this could be very long, but for example, like people living in rural areas that don't have access to menstrual products might experience more disease or more infection because they're using and therefore have more illness related to menstruation. And then perhaps menstruation is seen in a more negative light because it can lead to illness, where I am not typically concerned about menstrual illness because I have sanitary products, or just, lots of products whenever I want them. And I think there's so many things. I did a little bit of research into menstrual leave policy, which is essentially a policy that can be enacted in a country to allow people to take time off work because of their menstrual cycle. And it's been so interesting to see the responses to this, because in some countries this is accepted. However, people don't actually use it because you would then have to say that you're menstruating. And also in countries where it hasn't been enacted, there is a lot of backlash actually by people who are menstruating because they fear discrimination on the basis of sex and menstrual status, given that perhaps they're less likely to be employed, given that they might actually be taking more time off work. And so that's just, to add to the answer, that there is just such a wealth of experiences that people in India might have different experiences given the advertising that they've experienced, or the religious beliefs, but then those religious beliefs are different in another part of the world. So I'll try and keep it short, but there's lots of things to say.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Ahana, you want to take it?
I can take it too, anything. I was thinking we should just to respond to that, like, it doesn't even have to like be world over. In India, every 30 kilometers there's a different language, and every few
Exactly.
steps, like the class and the privilege changes, and the experience is completely different. So yeah.
It's very true.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. We're pretty much open for questions from others now, from everyone else here. So if you have any questions, you can unmute yourself and you can ask, or you can put them in the chat and we can ask them for you. Either way. Or if you want to share an experience, actually, it doesn't have to be a question. If you'd like to share an experience or just start a different conversation, if you feel like there's some part of this conversation that's been missed out and you want to highlight that.
If you would like to respond even to the film, like whatever maybe you could really relate to, or whatever came, like whatever was the most strong image, or what you learned from it, or something new you saw, anything, please feel free to share.
Hi, this is Nidhi. First of all, this was my second viewing of the movie, and I watched it with as much wonder and awe. So, yeah, great job, Varsha, and thank you, Team Amara, for um, having the viewing once again. And when I was working, interning of sorts, volunteering at Amara last year, I remember having conversations with Surabhi and Tayuri about how can this be communicated to children, because we don't want to overwhelm them with a lot of realistic visuals. And I really like the way in which Varsha has, put those in a very mild yet in a very effective way. And so, when you want to hold awareness sessions, especially for um, a younger age group, I think this is the best way to go about it. And I really love that part of the movie.
Thank you so much, Nidhi. I really appreciate that. And thank you also for coming to watch it 2 times. It's really special to hear. If anyone else has anything to say or ask, I'm here for it. Would love to hear.
Okay, I'm not gonna cut, I don't wanna cut the space short, but okay, there's something on the chat. I can read it out. Not a question as such, but I love the depth and complexity it captures, especially bits like it's not empowering really, it's natural, just natural. I resonated with that quite a bit. So I guess I wanted to know more about more about the different perspectives and how they impacted you.
Yeah, I think that's a question. I mean, and again, we've kind of talked about this already, and I've sort of said like, yeah, to me, it's just neutral, and maybe sometimes I like it more than others, but I think I'm so glad to hear that that resonates, because that was a perspective that actually required a little bit more work for me to access in my community. Naturally, the people that stepped up to talk about menstruation when I put out a call to have this conversation were people that were in love with their period, or just like really wanted to reclaim it, and had a lot more comfort talking about it, and felt like this need to put forth a perspective of love towards menstruation. And people that didn't really feel that way were a little bit harder to come by. I found that male identifying non-menstruating people were a lot more difficult to come by. So I think basically I had one friend that was saying like, the perspective of like, if I didn't ever menstruate again, like I would be totally fine with it. Her perspective, and when she was speaking was saying, like, I kind of feel like nobody else is talking like this because everyone else is sort of like, we love periods. And so to me, it was also really helpful because I didn't, and I still don't always know, like, how do I feel about it? So essentially the different perspectives, I hope that young people that see this, or even people who have been menstruating for a long time, just recognize that you have the ability to choose. You don't have to see it any one way, but here is a total wealth of different perspectives, giving you a lot of different ideas on how people resonate and experience their periods and how you might be able to as well. So I think that's how it impacts me, is just realizing that there's a lot of choice here.
Yeah, I think that's like something you have been reiterating throughout. And if everyone is open to it, I would actually love if we could hear some more perspectives. Like, how do you feel about menstruation? How do you feel about periods? Yeah, and anyone who has to go, I know we're going a little bit over time, but this is an important conversation, right? So we would love to hear the place you're coming from as well. I can also start, like, just give me a Yeah, so for me personally, whenever I think of menstruation, it's about listening to my body in terms of the food it craves, and what can I do, like maybe how can I move it or like stretch myself for it to feel better. um but it's also about, like, there are right now, like, we still are pretty privileged and we still can take some time off or do something, but like even I have to stay on my feet for a lot of things, so it's about trying to find that balance where I can listen to myself, because my body is going through an intense process and it needs me, but I also have things to do. So maybe giving into those cravings and just being kind to yourself so you can keep that balance.
I can share. For me, very honestly, my periods have just been something that happen every month, and there's really no second thought for it. For me, I'm lucky, I guess, that way. Like, I don't have too much to feel, too much to think about when I'm on my periods, especially after I started using the cup. Like, very honestly, I've thought about it even less. So for me, it's just something that happens. It comes and goes. But I think for me, it's a very, very big emotional turmoil that happens before, and that can be like one of the most difficult times for me in the month. And that's something that I do associate with a lot. And at the same time, I think when I'm on my period, because I don't really like, it doesn't make too much of a difference for me, but because like in Amara, at least we're out a lot and we're seeing the way that a lot of people in a lot of basti areas, like urban slum settlement areas, are experiencing. I think, and because so the Didi who works at my house, she tells me a lot like about how she doesn't have a toilet in her living space, and so she uses the toilet either at our house or in our society. And I think these things, I can't really get them out of my mind when I'm on my period and or otherwise also. And I think that is something that keeps coming forward, like the convenience that I have for to be able to not feel it for those 5 days. I think that's something that comes to my mind a lot. If anyone else would like to share, please go ahead.
I can relate to what Ahana said. So initially growing up, I saw other girls who would do sports and work out during their period, and it really wasn't a big deal for them. Whereas me, on the other hand, I usually had cramps, and yeah, I would just sink into bed, pretty much nothing on those 4 days. And I would feel guilty because I wasn't strong. That's what I felt. That maybe I had a less threshold for pain. I kept trying to be better. But now I agree with what Ahana said, that it works differently for different people, and it's just best when um, you know what works for you. So now I associate period with rest and like a break from everything, and it really feels much better and less exhausting on my mind as well. So yeah, for me, period is about a break and rest.
Thank you for sharing that, Nidhi.
Okay. Don't really want to cut it, but I think we're quite over time. So I think we're going to end it now. But the space is always open for more conversations. You can always get in touch with Varsha or Project Amara, and you can definitely continue this conversation with us. Maybe Ahana or Surabhi, could you put our social links in the chat? Yeah, and Varsha just put her email as well. So you can definitely get in touch to have this conversation further. And before you all go, I just want to share the fact that right now, with the lockdown, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of people have lost livelihoods. A lot of people didn't have access before and still don't have access to sanitary products, to hygienic spaces to deal with their menstruation. So that's toilets or medicines for period cramps, food to have nutrition, spaces where they can mentally process menstruation, because now, especially with the lockdown, a lot of men are at home all the time, and a lot of people who menstruate are just, it's very difficult to deal with that. So there's a lot of different issues, and where the Project Amara, we're trying to work to actually provide so cloth pads, sustainable cloth pads, to menstruators in a lot of the urban settlement areas in Pune right now. So if you are in Pune and you'd like to volunteer with us on ground, so you can come with us and help us with the distributions and sessions, or if you can donate and help the cause so that we can raise more funds to donate more pads, we'd be really grateful for either and for your support. So please consider that. And if neither of those, please consider just reading up about the issue. If nothing else, we'll share our link tree. And yeah, Ahana's just shared our link tree, and that has a webinar about the impact on menstruators during the pandemic. So you can go and watch that and understand how it has affected a lot of people who don't have access to some of these basic facilities and comforts and rights during the pandemic. So thank you very much. And just a huge, huge shout out to Varsha for taking all the time to join us today, and also for the amazing film. I'm sure we have a lot to reflect on it. I have a lot. My dad actually watched it with me, standing right next to me. So I'm going to have a conversation with him after it. So yeah, I think this is really amazing. And thank you everyone who joined us as well. And thank you, Surabhi, also for initiating this conversation, and yeah, bringing Varsha in, and for this lovely space today. And hopefully we can do more of these and more conversations.
Thank you all so much for showing up and having this conversation and listening. So grateful.
Thank you, Varsha.
Thank you.
Thank